1460 WVOX.
Good morning, 8:39. This is Good Morning Westchester on 1460 WVOX and WVOX.com. Yes, Westchester it is, and Westchester is the subject of my next guest. He is Dan Schorr. He is running for district attorney. Now, I know the election isn't until 2009, but he has announced early. He is a graduate of the Harvard Law School. He's been an assistant DA, worked in the DA's office in both Westchester and Queens County. Please welcome for the first time on Good Morning Westchester, Dan Schorr. Good morning, Counselor. Oops, hold on.
Me, Bob.
There you go.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Oh, thank you for being on. Now, I ask this of every candidate, Counselor. Why do you want to do this to yourself?
Being district attorney, well, first of all, my experience as an assistant district attorney is the most rewarding experience that I've ever come across. Every day you are prosecuting crimes, working with crime victims, trying to keep people safe. And being the district attorney, you have the ability to take that to a countywide level, make sure that you have a good relationship with the police, make sure that important priorities are prosecuted, and work with assistant DAs to make them the best that they can be. So I see it as the best job that I could imagine.
Really, the best job that you... Now, you've been, obviously, an assistant district attorney. What was that like, being a prosecutor?
It was incredibly interesting. Every day, there was something new. There was just such a rewarding experience every day. I went to law school to become a prosecutor. I specialized in the prosecution of domestic violence, child abuse, and sex crimes. I did homicide prosecutions, and every day you're working with police officers, working with crime victims, working with witnesses, trying to keep people safe, trying to lock up people who hurt people.
Now, that's a noble... I'm sorry to cut you off there, but that is a very noble intent. And I know, and I'm looking at this note here, where you specialized in domestic violence, sex crimes, and such. Is that something you always wanted to do? Were you moved by any particular events in your life?
Originally, when I first decided to become a prosecutor, I didn't anticipate going into that area, but one of the first internships I had in law school, I was working with some victims of domestic violence, and it really touched me and changed the course of my career. Those cases are different than any other case because the victims are often in a pattern of repeated abuse where it's not just an isolated incident. There's an escalation of violence that starts from yelling and slapping and can lead to homicides. There are psychological issues. Witnesses are afraid to testify for good reason, so you work with counseling programs. And there's a challenge with every single case, and that made it even more interesting and rewarding.
8:41, we're talking with Dan Schorr. He is the Republican candidate for district attorney here in Westchester County. He will be running when the time comes, obviously, against Janet DeFiore, the former Republican turned Democrat, for that job. A little more about your interest in domestic violence and then bringing it up to the DA's level. Obviously, the DA's level is a more executive type job. You've got to get others to do this. What would you focus on if you got the job?
There are some major changes that need to be made in the DA's office right now. One of them is that modern technology is not being utilized by the DA's office in Westchester. For instance, in Queens County and other counties, when a victim of domestic violence gets an order of protection, the defendant is given a bracelet that's GPS monitored. The victim gets a cell phone if she doesn't have a cell phone, and she gets a text message if the defendant violates the order of protection by coming close to her home. It warns her not to go home if she's not home. It tells her to lock the door if she is home. And the police also get notified that the defendant is violating the order of protection. Now, Westchester used to be the place where new technology was utilized first and foremost, and now we're behind the times. Westchester's not using technologies like this, even though they're out there. That's one of many changes that need to be made to keep us safe here in Westchester.
8:43, again, we're talking with Dan Schorr. He is the Republican candidate for district attorney here in Westchester County. Now, not that it's a 500-pound gorilla in the room, but I've heard you on other shows and during other interviews, and the issue always comes up of the woman you're running against, Janet DeFiore, and the fact that she changed parties. Was this a surprise to you, to you all in the Republican Party, and how did you feel about that?
Well, it was absolutely a surprise because in 2005, there was an open election for district attorney. There was no incumbent. The Democratic and Republican nominations were both available, and she actively sought the Republican nomination. She lobbied for it hard. She took the money and the work of the volunteers, and she won as a Republican, and about a year later switched parties to the Democratic Party. And she gave reasons that some people have doubted. She said that she changed because the principles of the party, of the Democratic Party, were closer to her. And that seems strange considering a year earlier she had sought the Republican Party nomination.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, if I may. I've only got a couple of minutes left, and I want the public to get to know you a little bit. We'll do this a lot more often as we go forward, and we will, of course, invite District Attorney DeFiore on the show as well. What are your interests? What do you like to do when you're not prosecuting? And I'm happy that you do this, that you take such a serious view of domestic violence. Pet peeve of mine, believe me. What do you do in your spare time? What's your life like?
Well, I also teach criminal law. I taught in China for a year. I teach at Pace Law School. Beyond the criminal law world, I'm a recreational basketball player. I like to travel. I love living in Westchester and visiting new parts of Westchester and restaurants. So I try to enjoy our community here as much as possible.
Where's home for you right now?
White Plains.
Right, in White Plains. Now, one last question. It's always the last question I ask in the first interview. I'm in the booth. I got the levers. Why do I want to pull the lever for Dan Schorr and not Janet DeFiore?
Because I'm an experienced prosecutor who will work with police and with crime victims in a way that is not being done right now to make sure that the people of Westchester are kept safe. Right now, not everything is being done to keep us safe, and that needs to be changed.
And if you had to pick one, what's the first thing you'll attack if elected?
I'll make prosecutors work again with the police department in ways that they're not working with them now. Right now, the police feel like they can't trust the DA's office. Many detectives in Westchester are taking cases to the federal government because they don't trust the DA's office to do a good job, and I'll change that.
Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, and you'll be back again. Thank you very much, Dan Schorr. He's the Republican candidate for District Attorney here in New Rochelle. As we say, a little taste, just to get to know him a little bit. We'll have him on again and for greater lengths coming up.